So welcome to the MD podcast with me, Martin Hartley. I'm the commercial director for Emagine. Emagine are a professional services consultancy, and we specialize in providing high value, low population SMEs to the banking and financial services sector. Being a leader within the world's leading financial services organizations is aspirational. However, few people make it to the top. The Emagine podcast will offer interesting, insightful, and frank discussions on the biggest issues facing directors and divisional leaders in the financial services sector. The show aims to inspire and educate future leaders by telling them career stories of today's leaders. I can't wait for today's episode. I'm joined by John Rutledge, Director of Business Management Office at Mizuho, and he's based in Tokyo. John, welcome.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
How you doing? You okay?
Yeah, doing good.
Excellent. Okay, so for those of you that listened to the show before, we look at the past, the present, and the future, and we'll go through John's career to date, picking out any key learns that we can help for the next generation of aspiring leaders to come through. So John, let's go back right to the very beginning. Whereabouts are you from?
Originally from the States, born and raised in Texas, in the Dallas suburbs. Grew up there, went to school and high school all the way through in Dallas.
Nice. Okay. And it was what was it like growing up in Dallas?
Oh, well, this was it was a great place, for me. Lots of wide open space. We went had a lot of good friends, and we did a lot playing outside, watching a lot of football. But it was a great place to grow up. Yeah.
Nice. And was Dallas a big finance hub at the time?
Not really. I mean, Dallas was, obviously there's been a lot of, a lot of oil, things like that. Of course, a lot of the big commercial oil and trading was down in Houston. Dallas has always had, the Southland, and there's some property companies, but it's never really been a big a finance hub. More recently, we've seen a lot of growth in Dallas. I haven't been back in a while, but we've seen a lot of multinationals relocate. I believe Toyota's relocated there. A lot of them are kind of the northern corridor up north of beyond Dallas in the Plano area and those areas. But it's really grown and it's diversified a lot. I come from a dual cultural background. I'm half Japanese and half American. And when I grew up there, there were some Asians there, and South Indians, South Asians. But not as many. And now, if we go back there, it's a true melting pot. It's really exciting to see the diversity that has come to that area.
Nice.
Just in the past few decades. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a big that whole area, and that's quite a big tech hub as well, isn't it? So. Yeah. Cool. Okay. And so, what did your parents do? What did your family do?
Yeah. So, my father met my mother in the Air Force. He was stationed in Japan. And in the late 50s, early 60s, they met there and got married. Lived in Japan for a little bit, but then they relocated back in the U.S. And originally, my father is from the South Carolina,
Okay, cool.
and they were originally planning to live there. But as he was traveling, I believe he flew into the West Coast and was driving through the country to go to the East Coast, and had some friends in the Fort Worth area. I don't know if you know Fort Worth. It's kind of the sister city to Dallas. We had saw some friends there, and it turned out that he kind of liked the area, and ended up relocating and actually staying in Texas. And so that's kind of where we got our start in Texas. My father has done, he was a kind of a radar technician in the Air Force. And so he was into a lot of electronics. He had worked for Texas Instruments for a time as well. My mother was got her MBA in the US, and worked for places like Jetro and kind of the World Trade Center. And was doing a lot of work with kind of import and export companies, and then at that time there was a lot of new industries, new companies trying to get into the U.S. So that was kind of the work that she did. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. All right. So we can see where there's that your technical background and where that element comes from must be from your father's side. Yeah.
Yeah, of course I had that. I probably definitely got that, from my father too. A lot of interest in kind of electronics, and for me, the first half of my year was career, and we'll get into it, was a lot of IT, and so I was programming computers beginning in probably middle school when I started off. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, cool. Okay. So high school was good for you?
Yeah, it was a great time. Had a lot of, because this was the 80s, and so a definite cultural vibe there. Growing up in the 80s in Texas, in the U.S.
The best music era,
Uh,
yeah?
a lot of great friends. Friday night football. I have a lot of great memories of high school in Texas.
Nice. And then did you stay in the States for college, university?
Yeah, so ended up going to the University of Colorado. And for me, it was, after being, raised in Texas, lots of wide open space, but not a lot of, I would say, geographic diversity in that sense. And, I opened the pamphlet, I guess, to see Boulder. And there's this beautiful little town nestled right up between the Rockies to the west and the Great Plains to the east. And I took one look at that, and it just had to go there. I'd
Nice.
been skiing maybe once, so I was never a big ski. I got into skiing a lot more, obviously by virtue of being there. But it was really just the excitement, the desire to live someplace new, experience a different environment,
Yep.
and a different geography. And spent 4 years in Colorado, getting my degree in international business there. And again, I had a great time, learned a lot, and then was a great place to go to school.
Nice. Okay. What made you decide to do international business then?
Well, I mean, I guess a lot of that probably came from my mother and father, right? I mean, my father was more on the technical side of things, but certainly what my mother was doing, and she would work at the World Trade Center in Dallas, and I'd go in and visit her office every now and then. And back those days, the communication, international phone calls were very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So they had a telex machine, something that would punch little holes in a tape, and there was a lot of communication that way. And just seeing things like that, and not really knowing exactly what she was doing, but sometimes there would be boxes full of things that they were importing, paper origami things or craft items from Japan, and I just was always found that very interesting. And some days I think, I was even helping her, if I recall now. She'd have some things they would have to help repackage or things like that, and I would help her out with that. And that's probably where I really got interested in that, in terms of what is business, and it wasn't really it obviously didn't have a clear understanding of what finance was at the time.
Yeah.
But certainly after that, and then starting part-time jobs, starting at when I was a kid, I was thinking a babysitting service for the neighborhood, things like
Absolutely.
that, and just getting into things like that was kind of the nascent start to all of that.
Yeah, sure. What was the dream then when you were younger? What did you aspire to do? Did you know you had a career path, or?
Well, no, I certainly didn't think that was my career path. I thought, I was a pretty good student in school in terms of the kind of the math and the sciences.
Mhm.
And so, it's the usual dreams of a kid, it's an astronaut,
Yep. Yeah.
doctor, things like that. And didn't even know what engineering was at the time, right? But I
Sure.
thought some of that was really cool. But ended up, I started in Colorado and the university in the engineering school, but within kind of midway through, switched over to the business school. I just found I was more interested in business school, just reading the paper, Wall Street Journal, Fortune magazine. It was just something that captured my interest a lot more, and that's when I really started to having an understanding, a feel for kind of what I wanted to do going forward. It still wasn't clear, it still wasn't 100% clear to me in terms of the exact career, the role that I would have.
Yeah.
Of course, having the IT background as well, the technology background, and that was a key, and that really get me started in terms of a lot of the work I did in terms of technology in the kind of the first half of my career.
Nice. Great segue there then. So you graduate from college.
Mm-hmm.
What happens next? What's the thought process?
Right. Well, of course, right now, like I said, I'm bicultural, half Japanese, half American. I had been born and raised and spent most of my years in the U.S.
Yeah.
We had lived for a couple of years. I went to kindergarten in Japan.
Okay, cool.
And I'd gone to Japan, so I have, cousins and aunts and uncles and family in Japan. So would go there for summer vacation. but I never really lived in Japan, especially as an adult. And I guess there was also part of me that wanted to know that, to get to better know that kind of other part of me, the Japanese half of my
your
heritage,
culture. Sure.
right? Exactly. And so I kind of decided that after school I'd go to Japan. You know, I again did not have a job lined up. You know, back in those days, there was not really the, you know, it was well, pre-internet, and so, you know, job you know, finding was you know, through classified ads and different methods, and many different methods than they were today.
Very difficult on an
you know,
international level.
yeah. Yes, and exactly. And so it was really more because I had relatives and extended family in Japan. Just kind of picked up and went after school, figuring, you know, I'll find a job somehow, and I can, whether it's part-time, you know, who knows. You know, up until then, I had, even during college, I'd had part-time jobs, and so, you know, I'd always, you know, felt that, you know, if you're driven enough and continue to look, you know, you'll find work. You can't always be as picky or as choosy as you want, and especially when you're young and, you know, straight out of school, you kind of take what you can get. Obviously, you know, you're looking for things that interest you. So I basically went over to Japan without any job prospects, and then started my search then. And within about 6 months, I had landed a job. At the time, so there was no, obviously, internet. There was no LinkedIn, and so the local English language newspaper was called the Japan Times, and the classified ads for jobs were always in the Monday edition. So
Okay.
I very much remember that on Monday mornings I would get up early, go down to the station, and pick up a copy of the Japan Times
with a classic red pen.
Classified it. Yes, and started that, right. And then, you know, that means, you know, reading the job descriptions, submitting resumes, right, via snail mail, right, mailing out resumes and cover letters. And in Japan, right, and, you know, it's interesting, you know, the differences that you see in Japan and the US. So in Japan, the resumes are almost pre-formatted. There's a fixed kind of format that you would have for resumes. You can buy them at any kind of stationery store, but they have a space for your educational background, from kindergarten, a space for your picture, hobbies, previous job experience, but it's all very much pre-formatted. You know, you don't have a lot of creativity there.
Is that still the same today?
Yeah, well, you know, things have changed a little bit, right, with a lot of the online jobs, but a lot of the more traditional ones still have those, still use those, and they are they need to be handwritten. So, right, you don't, so you don't create your resume and print out a bunch of copies, right? You can't do that. You need to actually, they want to see that handwritten. I believe it probably shows, you know, your focus or your commitment, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know, when I was first starting out, and again, my written Japanese certainly wasn't great. I remember spending a lot of time writing Japanese and filling out these resumes in Japanese to send out and to mail out. It was again.
It certainly helped your progress in writing Japanese.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of practice there, so it turned out really good. But yeah.
So your first job was with Yellow Pages?
Yeah, so the Japan Yellow Pages. Now, you know, so this is an interesting story too. So normally the Yellow Pages historically have been a part of the a business, part of the. Oh, excuse me. Hold on 1 second. Let's pause that one. Okay, sorted out that one.
Yeah, no worries. I'll start again. So, so your first job was as a software developer with the Japan Yellow Pages.
That's correct. So, you know, normally the Yellow Pages are a business entity within the kind of the phone company, right? The national phone company, and they're these huge, thick, and yellow
I remember
with Yellow Pages, right? Yeah. But in terms of, and this was actually the Japan Yellow Pages, and it was an English language Yellow Pages being published in Japan. And the president of the company, Mr. Suzuki, had actually trademarked Yellow Pages to his name in the early 70s.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so if you ever come to Japan, and of course, I guess they still have them, but NTT is the big phone company here, and they call their yellow pages the town pages, and they were never able to call them the yellow pages because Mr. Suzuki had registered his name, and they'd always tried. Every year I think they made an offer to him to try to purchase that trademark from him, but he wouldn't let go. He was a good guy, and of course a lot of the business too was if you think about it, back in those days the yellow pages provided a lot of information
Oh, yeah.
for people that were
Completely.
seeking business partners and opportunities like that. And so
It
a
was
big
the
part of the
internet,
business,
essentially, wasn't it?
yeah, exactly, but pre-internet, yeah,
Yeah.
and a big part of that business was actually importing yellow pages from other countries,
Okay.
states in the US, or Indonesia, Malaysia, Hong Kong, and selling them to people in Japan that were interested in finding markets overseas. So there's obviously those were a great source of information. But then I also remember that takes up a lot of space, because you're talking about
Yeah.
lots of paper, lots of big books there.
Yeah.
And my initial foray there was just kind of helping out the Mr. Suzuki in terms of a lot of communications with my bilingualism. But after a while, he had there was an old PC or an old Mac sitting there collecting dust, and somebody had purchased some kind of database software, but they'd never really figured out how to use it, and so it had been gathering dust. And I took, I kind of pulled the cover off the thing and started playing around with it, and basically created, because everything that then was based on paper, so
Yeah.
they had everything all written down on paper, and so basically created a database and an application for tracking subscribers, tracking inventory of those your foreign yellow pages that I'd mentioned, and basically converted it from a paper-based to an electronic system. And that's really kind of where the first part of my career that launched me into IT,
Yeah.
programming
Sure.
and development and analysis. Yeah.
What was the application built from?
Well, back in those days, it was a Mac and a Macintosh, and historically, another interesting fact is that the Mac had a proportionally large part of the market in Japan at the time, because they were one of the first platforms to actually have a native Japanese OS. And
Oh,
so
okay.
back in those days, Apple actually had a significant a portion of the market, which obviously went down over time. And in those days, there was a French software company that created a database program called 4D. I don't even know if they're around anymore. But yeah, this was this is even probably pre Microsoft Access, right?
Nice.
Getting filling that out, and of course a lot of that too was the language. Because they bought it in Japanese, and I had to learn what an array was in Japanese, and so I could understand. I had the concepts. I knew that from my programming and what I learned in college, but then having to transpose that and kind of change that into Japanese was another big.
It's difficult.
It was a big learning experience, right? But it was also great. It was very challenging, but also very those kind of things can be very, very rewarding when you can accomplish and build something like that.
Yeah, completely. Well, that's cool, because obviously you've kind of gone in. I think there's a key learns there, right? You've gone in as almost a communications analyst to work with the owner, and you've created a role for yourself, which therefore has also created a career path for yourself by being inquisitive, by trying to do more, by trying to go the extra mile, and therefore actually starting to transform that organization as well. So I suppose,
when you're young, the opportunities are in different places. I think as you mature through your career, the opportunities and the roads are always there, I believe. It's just that they're going to be in different ways and in different directions. So when I was young, and like I said, I started in that job in one role, and fairly quickly moved that into another one, because that's where I could add value. And when that value is recognized, then you focus more on that, and then it's kind of becomes a very kind of a positive feedback on that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. Keeping an open mind, open to opportunities, other chances to do different things, either in different industries or in different parts of the same organization. will really, I think, then further broaden, your options as you progress into the middle career and even further.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, one good piece of advice I was given early on in my career was always ask for more. Ask for more work. Try and contribute, and it's all about that value add. So even if it's not your day job, it doesn't have to be. Like, it's just about. I think people forget that. People get kind of siloed into, this is my job, this is what I'm meant to do, rather than it being, okay, what's the holistic goal here? What's the collective objective, and how can we all contribute to that? And if we can all contribute to that and we can all add value, then we all move forward and we all move up. So, yeah, I like that.
Absolutely.
It's a key learn for any grads out there, anyone coming through, isn't it? It's just, try and make yourself indispensable as well. Try and add value wherever you can. Okay, so Yellow Pages, we then moved off. You established yourself as a developer now, right?
Yeah, developing, and then again, talking about a career switch, right? I went from a publishing industry to multimedia. I worked for a company. I mean, the name is Japanese. I got it by Daijobu, but basically, they were a company that was developing English language, kind of English teaching software for children, using kind of animation and a lot of multimedia. Back in those days, it was something called Adobe Macromedia, which is not around anymore. That I think even predates Flash, which isn't around anymore either. But that's what we were using to build those. Obviously, we had one group of people that were the designers and the artists, the creatives. So they would create the visual assets. We had sound engineers that were creating the sound. And I was a part of the team that did the programming. So we would bring it all together. And in those days, again, just internet was just getting off, but it was not really the delivery mechanism that it is today. And so back in those days, the medium of delivery was CD-ROMs. So we would develop CD-ROMs, right? And we were also, again, there was a lot of challenges there because, again, it was a small company. So we didn't have the resources and the budget to create a Mac version and a Windows version. But like I said before, Mac was a significant part of had significant market share in Japan back into the mid 90s. And so you couldn't ignore the Mac platform either. And so what Macromedia allowed was to create a single kind of two separate executables, one for each platform, that would then use the same assets in terms of creating the application, and it would run on both platforms. But then you run into different issues in terms of either color temperature differences between the Mac and the Windows platform, the way audio files are handled. Lots of challenges, and that was one of those jobs where, if you're publishing a CD-ROM, you have to it's kind of like a publisher. You have to deliver the golden master to the factory that's going to start stamping out, hundreds and thousands of those CDs, and you only have limited time to do it. So you have to meet that deadline. If you miss that deadline, it's going to have to be rescheduled, and you never know when that will be. So these were days when, in order to meet the deadline, we were 20 hours up, 6 hours down. The company was run out of an individual single unit home. And so, bedrooms and showers and kitchen and things like that. So, back in those days, again, I was much younger then, we were up for 20 hours, down for 6, and just kind of keeping doing that for sometimes, a couple of weeks as we're getting to the crunch and delivery date. Get it done and ship it out. And then, take a week off. I will say this, it's one of those, now that I've been in finance after that, and even before, it's been great. But in the finance world, there's no physical product these days, right? That you're developing or selling. And the job I did at that company, I could go to the software store, right? Following weeks after release, and see a product on the shelf that I had a part of that I was involved in creating. So again, that was a very that's a very fulfilling type of
you got that satisfaction,
to be a part of that.
You?
Yeah. And so and that's it's you can consider it kind of a manufacturing job, right? It was software manufacturing, but manufacturing.
And I suppose you similar to the print world that you were in, where you do need to hit a deadline for it to come out. So I think obviously looking at what you said there, and the whole point of the show is to pick out tips and hints, and to give back to the next generation coming through that there's some long hours there. There's a real dedication, real commitment to the cause. There's one objective, which we spoke about just recently. So I think, when you get in that startup environment, which you don't have to work for a startup to create that environment either. In teams now, you can do it yourself, right? But when you've got one common goal, one common objective, everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet, and everyone is committed for the cause and working those kind of hours, and you can really achieve a lot in a small space of time. And it doesn't matter whether you've got a desk in the bathroom or the master bedroom. So as it was for you there.
Again, I mean, I completely agree. There are times when, through your career and specific job and specific moments where there will be some long hours. There usually are, right? That was the case there, where we had deadlines to work with. But it's like you said, if your team is working towards a common goal in terms of delivering something, and as you work together, you build up that trust. You can achieve a lot in those kind of scenes, and again, you get a lot of great satisfaction working with people like that and accomplishing so much. And I can think back over my career and some of the teams that I had been on. And while we always want to build the best teams and put the best people together, I found that a lot of times, sometimes the best teams that I've been on would just happen to be those people at that place at that time. And we really clicked, and we got a lot done. And at other times, obviously, we've had instances where we've had to have teams together. I remember, after the Lehman bankruptcy, there were some all-nighters there in Tokyo. I was in Tokyo at that time. As part of a much larger organization, but at the same time, there was also that sense of camaraderie because we were working towards the same goal, sorting things out, right? And a lot of unknowns, but we got through it, and we were the better for it.
Interesting point there. Let's just take a moment on that. So, what other aspects do you think play into creating successful teams?
Right. Well, a lot of that obviously is the leadership involved in that team, and how much authority, how much do you empower the team to make their own decisions? Right. Some of the best teams that I were on, where obviously you had a senior, manager or senior stakeholders that you were accountable to, but they trusted us enough to get the job done, right? And so it was more about here's where we're at. Here are the problems we're experiencing. Here's what we have done, and it's a quick reporting up. And I would say when that hasn't been as good is when perhaps management has become a little bit too hands-on sometimes. Sometimes you call that micromanagement. But when you really, really need a team to do their job, I think you have to. Obviously they will be held accountable for delivery, but you also have to, and this is going to be tough for a leader and a manager. You have to trust them to make decisions on their own. And you have to find the right balance between guiding them, in some places, if your experience tells you that that they're going off the rails, then you actually have to put a stop to things or move things in another direction. Sometimes it's just a little nudge, right? Just kind of guiding them in the right direction.
Stabilizes.
And and sometimes it's just completely backing off, letting them do what they need to do and telling them, okay, thank you. Tell me where you're at on Friday. And then getting out of their way. And I think when I've been in positions like that for leadership, it's been very, especially when you're not familiar enough with the team, or perhaps you haven't experienced their successes, or you don't know how well they will function as a team. It can be kind of tough for a leader to give that kind of control and authority and trust. But I think you definitely have to do that, and that's where I think you'll have a lot more success that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's interesting. You see a lot of sporting analogies and that are discussed, and often when you look at the great managers of different sports and different eras, what they say on a game day typically isn't a lot. It's like everyone thinks that before a big match you have these rousing motivational speeches, but when actually you look inside the professional environment of sports and athletes and whether that's football or basketball or American football, whatever. It tends to be that like the players are focused, they know their jobs because they've been really well prepared the week before. So actually on game day, it's just about making the environment relaxing, motivational on an individual level, because obviously not everybody's the same, and taking that into consideration, and then letting them do their thing, which obviously transpires to what you said there about essentially getting out of their way, right? You can't do everything for them. So
getting out of the way, and at times it's not as much leading them as supporting them, right? I mean, you are the leader or you are the manager, but sometimes what they don't need is leadership. They need more support, and that's about getting out of their way, or providing them, or getting obstacles out of their way. Right? A lot of times, you'll hear leaders say, "Well, if you have a problem, come talk to me, escalate to me, and we'll take care of it." But a lot of times, what you've seen is happen when you do that, it either gets thrown back, or it doesn't really get resolved. And so again, that's where the teams have to, and that's, again, it's a trust issue, right?
Or it gets taken over.
Yeah, exactly, right. Well, you told us we were going to let us to do it. I mean, to escalate things, and here we have. And now, like you said, exactly, a very good point. It gets taken away again, and that kind of destroys trust, or it reduces the trust, and it can have a negative.
I'm morale. So
absolutely. But
Cool. Okay, nice. Good discussion point. I like that. Segue into finance then. Your first role in finance, 97 to 2000, UBS. Bit of a change of direction as well. Now we're going down the business analyst route, but obviously still using your technical background, your technical know-how. What was the thought process in the switch of A, lanes for domain industry, and B, job types?
Right. That was, again, was just kind of a serendipitous encounter with a recruiter who actually ended up becoming kind of a friend and an acquaintance, and had said, we got to talking one day, and he said an opportunity at UBS, and of course, like I'd moved international business school. I'd always been interested in business in general, and of course, I was still not very familiar with the details of what a financial services firm does. But I also looked at it again as an opportunity. I had not. I guess you could say, well, I don't know anything about that, and so I'd rather, I'm going to play it safe. But again, especially and when you're earlier in your career, it's much easier to take a lot of those kind of risks.
Absolutely.
And of course, there was obviously some interest in there too. And so we went and interviewed and got hired. And really, my first foray into finance, it was more kind of on the equity side and technology. First, more in the back office operations area of technology support, and then midway through there, and my role there, switching over to the front office equity platform support. Again, and that's where I started. That's when my career started to kind of be less and less on terms of kind of a hands-on development. I was still, doing development, but that's where kind of the analysis, the business analysis, and some kind of elements of project management come into play. And that's also where you start seeing some more different requirements for leadership. Right, when you're doing things like project management, there's quite often nobody reports to you, but you've got to get things done. And so a lot of that is getting the buy-in and cooperation from teams. Even though people know it's something they needs to do, everybody has competing interests, and everybody has their day jobs to do. And so it presents its own challenges. But again, that was. Again, another opportunity for me to learn something new, branch out from what I had been doing. I've always been interested, so enjoy coding and developing and the technology. But moving into those kind of roles was another one to really help me kind of move up, and even without a specific goal there in terms of what career path I'm targeting, it was just more opportunity to, like you said, do different things, asking for more, asking to do more, and being given the opportunity to do so. Right. Again, UBS was a great company to work for, because for me, here in Tokyo in that time, there was, because they had just had the merger with SBC right after I joined. And so there were a lot of changes there. When you have a merger like that, obviously, both of the organizations have similar systems, whether in terms of fixed income, equity, trading systems, back office systems. So obviously, you're going to make a decision about which ones to keep. And then there are political issues involved about who gets to keep their baby.
Yeah, exactly.
But
who gets decommissioned or who stays?
Yeah, exactly, right, exactly. And that's both from your systems as well as your your systems as well as your job. So that does happen. But I guess for me, because I was lucky, right? I was still young. I had just joined. I was not targeted, or I was not on the dock for any kind of redundancy. So I was allowed to get focused on kind of the other projects that we were doing in terms of some of the integrations. But again, that was a great experience, seeing something like that up front and close as it's happening. It gives you a lot of insight into things like that.
Yeah, I suppose it can bring a lot of context as well, that it's not all hunky-dory, and it's there are other things that happen here. You'll see people coming and going, you'll see people not happy, but equally you'll see the rise of a better organization as well. So
they always talk about they always talk about a merger of equals, but when you really peel back the top on that one, it's usually not always the case. There's somebody's going to be a little bit more equal.
There's usually a bigger brother, isn't there?
Yes, but again, it's just the part of the way, right? Organizations, functions.
Exactly.
You have to be adaptable. You have to be resilient in the face of that, and it's only gotten faster, and in some instances more extreme these days, right? I think
completely.
We're seeing a lot more on that change, and I think even post. Well, we've seen obviously the past 2 years with the pandemic has been huge disruptions, right? And certainly a lot of businesses that did not survive, but a lot of businesses thrived, right?
Yeah.
And, you take a look at some of your Zooms, your Uber Eats, or there were businesses that did thrive.
Yeah.
And so I think post pandemic, it will be interesting to see what business life is like. What is teamwork like? What is management and leadership look like in this post-pandemic world? I think it's going to be very interesting.
No, it's a real interesting debate. It's an interesting topic. Obviously, it's Imagine we had to adopt our processes. We'd never worked remotely previously. We had to adopt how we work together, like how you then motivate staff, how you incorporate collaboration, encouragement, and that cohesiveness of consultants on multiple client sites working on multiple projects, then the internal staff as well. And I think we reacted very quickly, which was a real positive for us. And we're up 44% year on year. So we are a great example of that. And we're looking at our efficiencies. Our efficiencies have gone up from 40 to 60%. So you're looking at that as well, and it's like, right, okay, great. And now obviously the world, especially in the UK, is going back to some sort of new normal and back to the office. And now my thought process is going to, oh, hold on, we've made drastic improvements in this environment, in this bubble. So now how do I make sure that I get the same efficiencies and the same output when we go back to the office or a hybrid way of working, which we will do. So it's it's an interesting thought process. And how do we make sure that people feel part of a community, or if somebody's in the office and somebody's not in the office, how do we make sure you have that collaboration?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, Martin, you hit on a big one there, right? So the organizations we're seeing, right, a lot of them have rethought, right, office space, right, and obviously completely. With all the cascading effects into corporate office space. But that aside, so now you don't have enough space for everybody to be in the office every day.
No.
So how do you make that work? And there's technical solutions, in terms of how we're going to make that work, and the logistics of it all. But it presents interesting challenges. If part of your reason is to going into the office is to have the contact with people, then you want to make sure that the other people that you want to have contact are going to be in the office at the same time. But on the other end of that, not everybody can be in the office at the same time on the same day. So you've got to find that right balance. But those kind of logistics aside, you also mentioned a good point about, what does leadership look like in this post-corona world, right? Where you're managing remotely, right? Your one-on-ones are going to be more online, perhaps, right? And motivating. And how do you motivate a team, right? With you used to be able to have weekly team meetings. Maybe you had Bagel Fridays or something like that that you would do with the teams, and things like that. That again, you'll still try to do, but they're going to look. I think they'll look very different. And I think it will present a lot of, obviously it's presenting a lot of challenges for staff and managers, but it presents an equal amount of challenge to leadership to be able to figure out how to lead people, teams, and like you said, motivate them. And how do we assess performance when I'm not seeing someone, every single day? And so
it comes into that trust and empowerment, right? You've got to be
absolutely,
able to,
very true, very true. Yeah,
we tried to incorporate very early on socials. So we use Teams, but we bought a Zoom account. So Zoom was just for socials. So everyone knew that if it was on Zoom, it was just not associated with almost work. And it was like, so we did virtual race night. So virtual like awards evening where everyone actually still got dressed up, even though they were in the house. And we sent out like a hamper of drinks and food and snacks and stuff, whole virtual Christmas party. And so we try to keep the engagement levels there and the motivation levels there and on that. But then my one-to-ones I manage 2 teams, my one-to-ones have gone through the roof. So I have lots more touch points with people to make sure that everyone's okay, and more on like the mental and well-being aspect of it.
Absolutely.
And then obviously on the deliverables aspect of it as well, there's a lot more communication and collaboration that way. But it's been challenging.
Yeah. Did you find that, obviously initially, right, we all reacted quickly. We started ramping these up, and like you said, you probably set up some things that are kind of outside of work, off work type of social events, and we ramped those up. Now, did something similar, but I also found that whether you call it Zoom fatigue, after a while, it kind of has a little too much, right? It fills it out a little bit, right? And so I think we're in that phase now where we had the initial ramp up, it kind of went down, and now we're kind of figuring out what that right balance is going to be like. What's that
completely. We had that where we had a big. Every Friday was standard. We finished an hour earlier, and we had that time there. Then it kind of fizzled out in the summer because things opened up again, right, last summer.
And
then it kind of went back into it through the Christmas months, and it was like, okay, we picked that back up, and now we're not. We don't do as much of the social stuff on Zoom now, but we're trying to just put in days where we can all collectively go and meet up at outside events and stuff. So we've we've all bought tickets for Taste of London, which is next Thursday. So everyone will get a half day and go to Taste of London, which is outside, which is cool. And it's just still trying to keep in with those touch points. And we had a half-day strategy day in the office last week where we went in and we saw people, and then we're doing things more on like a team basis. So the sales team all met up and went for some food, and then the PM team will meet up and go and do their thing as well. So but it is just trying to find that happy medium, isn't it? And equally trying to take people's considerations in that some people are still a bit apprehensive about going back to the office or traveling, and it's a balancing act. So
I think we've spoken before. I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of this thing. It's still a couple of months away, certainly, and taking globally and other parts of the developing world are still facing a lot of challenges that we have to help them with, because this is a global pandemic, and it's not just about obviously the US's and the Britons and the Japans, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But like you said, and I think we'll find more of those kind of now that we can get out more, right? As the vaccination rates are going up, and we're coming out of these lockdowns. Exactly like you said, we'll find we will need to have create spaces and forums where we can actually be within physical contact. I mean, you think with all of this technology that we're really, location independent. But I think what this has shown us too is how important, physical proximity and contact can be, because there's so much in terms of facial features, body language, things that you just hear and pick up on the side from the virtue of being in a shared space with other people, that we probably didn't, that we either took for granted or we didn't realize how important it was until, again, it got taken away. And so
Absolutely.
I think that will also feed into the way, again, we look at developing people and how people's careers develop and how we lead and manage them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, completely. And it's about that, being able to see how other people operate, right? Your team would need to see how you work, how they can learn from you, how can they pick up tips and so on, and off each other.
Yeah.
So UBS is good. Jumping back into that, you then move back to the States. You then have a spell of a number of different organizations over in the States looking, you've gone back to the Texas area. You've then gone out to the Bay Area. Tell us about sort of just the thought processes and moving around there.
Sure,
and then I'm keen to speak to you about obviously your current role at Mizuho.
Sure. So, right now, so like I said, I mean, after college, given my kind of bicultural heritage, wanting to live and be in Japan for a while, at the time I had thought, well, maybe I'll be in Japan for 3 to 5 years, stretch that out to 8. But then at that point in my career, I had now been, working for 8, 9 years, and had no kind of experience or in the U.S. No U.S. experience on my resume. And it wasn't specifically because of that, but I did feel like I needed to now see what corporate life, what the business life, what it was like working in living in the U.S. Because again, up until that point, it's only been kind of schooling and upbringing, right? And so
makes sense.
Decided to move back, so that I moved back to the States in 2000, went to work for an internet consultancy. Of course, 2000, the kind of internet bubble had burst, but nobody had really caught on just yet. And so, between the time that I, left UBS, moved back to the States, got my living situation sorted out, went to training up in Boston, and came back to the office in Dallas, which is where I was based out of, in say October. That whole internet, the bubble had burst and things were cratering. Yeah. And so unfortunately, the company that I worked at, they had to close their Dallas office. So, again, I was very lucky in the sense that I was actually on one of the few engagements on the customers that were in the Dallas office. So I was able to be retained for a few months to continue on. So that gave me a little bit of breathing room. Of course, after that, that go well. I gave the internet consultancy a shot. I can get the more small or entrepreneurial startup-y type of environment, and I need to go now work someplace that's a little bit more solid and established. Was my thinking anyway. And so in June of 2001, took a job at Enron. and 6 months later, Enron was bankrupt. But again, I look at it. It was unfortunate, but I also saw that when seeing something like that from the inside out was, again, a great experience. Yeah. I was also very lucky. I did not have a lot of money tied up in corporate, in the company stock options. And so, in terms of financial impact, I was eventually out of a job, but, seeing what's going on there, and versus what you see on the news after I go home and seeing all the reporting on the news, and seeing what a bankruptcy looks like from the inside.
How did it differ from the inside to what was published?
Oh, well, for example, you take so obviously in bankruptcy and winding down, you're trying to extract as much value for the shareholders as possible, right? Or your creditors, basically, at that point. And so if I forget what it was, I believe a Chapter 7 is just, that's it, shut it down, close the doors, goodbye, move on, and just sweep up the dust. But when you're trying to somehow reorganize or come out of that and trying to extract as much value as possible, well, your hard assets, your pipelines, everything from and things like, the liquid, the LCD displays, Herman Aron chairs, that stuff you can sell off. That's the hard assets. The other stuff, the gas deals and the pipeline deals, of course, because of what had happened at Enron, a lot of those deals had to be, revalued, and revaluing them, it was difficult, and there was a lot of work involved. But you still need people to get all of this done.
Yeah.
And so I remember, every quarter we would have to go to the bankruptcy court to get approval to fund and pay X number of people. And we always had to show a wind down. We had to show that we are reducing, in addition to extracting value for our creditors, right? We are also reducing the staff and the headcount by a certain amount. But obviously we need to pay them in order to get this job and get money for the creditors. So from the bankruptcy perspective, the creditors are always signing off on saying yes, yes, yes. Whereas when you saw that in the news, it was like, well, wait, why is Enron getting more money? Right? That this shouldn't they? Right? Well, that's just not right. That's not fair. And in a certain sense, that also happened on a much larger scale during the GFC, the financial crisis, right? The TARP that they had in the U.S., right? Why are we paying to bail these guys out? There was a lot of anger there, right?
Yeah, of course.
And seeing that, but again, I saw a very interesting, I think, documentary the other day about, I was Tim Geithner and Ben Bernanke, and Lawrence Summers that were involved in the heat of that, and there were things that they had to do that were not popular, but were at the end of the day were the right thing to do to get things done. And so seeing that thing from the inside out, in that sense, was a very interesting experience too, in terms of risk management. Now working in finance, what a product control department does, right? So now looking back, at the end of the day, you're like, well, where were the controls? Where was the product control in Enron that would have been covered, that would have kind of smoked out those irregularities sooner rather than later? And so again, a great learning experience that I could take to subsequent jobs and subsequent roles.
Yeah, I've got a great team, a product control team deployed at Credit Suisse, actually. So they're very much in the heart of all that. So what you're saying there, that takes...
Hold on one second. My AirPods are going to flame out on me right now. So let me change over to...
No worries.
An interesting cut. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. Cool.
We're good?
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So that's a very interesting point, and it takes us straight to sort of 2007 to 2013 for you, which is at Barclays. So you mentioned there, right in and around that 2008 era. How was your time there? Talk me through that.
Well, when I joined Barclays in 2006, I was still in the IT department. That was for about a year, and then I was asked if I was interested in doing a COO, business management role on the fixed income side. Now, again, this was something that I had never done before, and up until that point in finance, I was much more equities focused as opposed to fixed income. So it was a new side of the business as well, plus a role that I'd never done before. But people gave me the support and backing to do it, and so I thought, that's great. And this is really, I guess this is probably the third phase, if you will, in my career path, when I kind of migrated almost completely now out of IT and technology into the front office and the business management side. That was the latter part of 2007. So I cut my teeth on that job in 2008, when everything just kind of blew apart. And again, there were hard days, and there were days where, I'll be honest, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to make it, because a lot of times I didn't know what I was doing, or I had that fear, what do I want to call it, the imposter syndrome, right? I felt like, can I really do this? But and just sticking with it. And again, there were hard days, and especially around the Lehman bankruptcy that happened. That was, all of that really came out kind of over a weekend. And it made it more difficult in Japan, because Japan, let's see, it went into bankruptcy on a Monday morning. but Japan had a Monday holiday. And so, that caused all sorts of problems for us. We didn't know, okay, well, we got to go back and value it. We got to figure out what our exposure to Lehman was. Well, as of when? Friday, Tokyo, or
Yeah,
Tuesday
exactly.
morning, Tokyo, right? Again, a lot of things that we didn't understand. And then it led to things like, the LCH auction, right? So, all of the clear positions at the LCH had to be auctioned off. So by the time, we had just gotten done with, figuring out what our yen, because we were in Japan, what was our yen exposure to Lehman?
Yeah.
And of course, part of that was which Lehman entities, we didn't know. It wasn't unclear. And again, you can draw a direct line from that confusion. Yeah, you can draw a direct line from that confusion to why the concept of LEIs, right, were developed post financial crisis,
Yeah.
right, and why LEIs are so important now. So now we have a unifying, right, an identifier that is globally consistent. But yeah, we didn't know that. And about that time, after we had finished our kind of bilateral exposure and calculating that against Lehman's was okay. Now we need to participate in the LCH auction of LCN, because we're a participant, and we need to be a part of that. And first of all, I didn't know, again, like I said, I was new to the role and the business itself. So I didn't know. But even now, looking back on it, it's interesting, because most people in the front office did not know.
Yeah.
Because in those days, clearing was just kind of a boring back office function.
Completely, yeah.
All right, and so most guys probably traders knew that their trades were cleared at the LCH, but it never thought about what would happen if one of the members went bankrupt. So when they did that, right, okay, well, here is Lehman's portfolio at the LCH. I believe they had 5 currencies or big currencies or something like that, but yen was one of them, and then we had to value that because we had to bid for it. And then when you're giving your bid, it's down to very, very interesting things like, well, is it a plus or a minus number, right? That we're bidding for, right? Because again, these are things that we had not been a part of before. So again, lots of unknowns, lots of frustration, both from all around, but also again a feeling of camaraderie and teamwork, because we were there, pulling all-nighters, coming in on weekends to get the job done. But again, very, very rewarding. And again, it was a great. I keep thinking of all of these things that I have seen and experienced in my career that are I guess negative things or bad news events, but they've also been just very great learning experiences, and for me they've been great things to experience from a kind of a distance kind of way to look at it, because those things happen. And so I've been through a lot of crises, I guess, with the organizations that I've been a part of, but each one has been a great experience for me to learn things to do, things not to do, where to look for danger, where to look for risk, in the future. And so, I've just been, again, fortunate, I think, although in my view, to have been in the places that I was at those times.
Absolutely. That moment in time then, 2008, you obviously talked about imposter syndrome there as well. What's your thought process? Because you could either freeze at that point and you can bottle it, for want of a better phrase, and give up, or or you make yourself better and you improve,
right,
and you move forward. So what's going through your head at that point?
Right. Well, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of doubt, a lot of self-criticism, self-doubt about, can I make this happen? Am I going to be able to do this? But you're right. You have a choice at that point, right? And we always have to remember that, yes, you do have. Sometimes you sit, oh, what can I do? What can I do about it? It's not my problem. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. But you always have a choice about how you're going to react. You cannot control the outside events, right? Those things are beyond your control, so you can't worry about those. What you can focus on is how you react, how you react to a situation, how you react to a person, and sometimes it's easier said than done. Obviously, when things are very stressful, or you've been up all night and then you're bleary-eyed. But I think a lot of times you would catch a second wind I felt, you would go through that, you would push through, and then you would find that you're getting things done, you're moving forward, and then there would be other obstacles, right? And I think that perseverance, that resiliency,
Yeah.
and I'll look. I will say this, and I don't know. Maybe it's just a little bit personal, but I will leave it with you. But a big factor for me that impacted my life was my mother. Actually, my mother died of cancer when I was in high school, and so
Okay.
that was a big impact on my life. It changed. It had an impact on my value system, right?
Yeah.
In terms of what I consider to be important, what I can deal with, right,
Yeah,
at any
exactly.
point in my life. And so again, while that is it's unfortunate that happened, it did give me certain strengths later on in life that helped me carry through certain times, and other whether it's a personal crisis or focuses. And it also helps you give the balance too, in terms of what's really important. Sometimes we get so focused at the job, that we sometimes forget that there is life out there outside of work. And sometimes people, we couch it as a work-life balance, but it's so key to be able to have that kind of
Gives you
of
perspective,
being able to
doesn't
pull
it?
back. Yeah, exactly. Being able to pull back and see things, in total, in terms of your life, the people around you, and the larger society in the world as well. I mean, it's a little bit grandiose perhaps, but it's definitely true, because that helps you give that perspective, so then you can go back and focus and know where you really need to be spending your time.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really valid point, and it's a great tip for anyone that's in that environment, isn't it? It's about focusing on the here and now. Like I say, control the controllables, not letting the external factors influence what you can do immediately. So that's from the early part of your answer in there. But then, like you say, if you've gone through something in your personal life, it was the same for me when I lost my father. It's it kind of puts everything else into perspective. You can then almost rationalize like what is important and what's everything's important, but you can put it in some sort of order, and
Right,
then that
absolutely.
kind of grounds you again and allows you to think straight. So
Yeah, right. And that helps you, and that also helps with your leadership too, and your management, right? Because that helps you become a better leader, in the sense that now you say it gives you more perspective. It helps with your your EQ, right? Your ability to empathize with other people,
completely.
and that helps you become a better leader too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I conducted a podcast with Luke Waddington a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned in the future people will be paying for EQ, not IQ. We'll get robots to do the IQ stuff, but the EQ stuff there will always be a monetary value associated with good leadership and good managers there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, very much so. And I've been very fortunate. Again, like I said, I've had an equal kind of an IT and kind of a business side of combined career, and a lot of my success on the IT side was I was able to speak IT to the IT folks and speak business to the business folks. But again, when I look back further too, a lot of that came from my bicultural background. The fact that I speak both Japanese and English has given me, that kind of an ability, and luckily and fortunately, because it's not, it was something that I was fortunate to have without actually having to go out and pay for it. That kind of experience that has given me the ability to hear and speak with people in one frame, in context, one language, and being able to translate that one into another,
completely.
and help facilitate. In the way, some of the best times, the best fulfilling times I've had is when that has helped facilitate communication between two different parties. Right, when something is missing, they're not communicating correctly. Sometimes there's some frustration, but being able to jump in and help that communication and coming to an agreement or coming to an understanding of the same thing, is also can be quite fulfilling, either between teams, between members of your own team. I don't know if you've ever done this, but you've been in a meeting and you'll hear two people talk about something, and they seem to agree, but you can kind of pick up that they're talking about the same thing, but they're not really. And so you have to sometimes, then this again goes back to that guidance and that nudging, or kind of shining a light, a different perspective on people. It's like, well, Sally, Jim, Sally said this, right? But and you took it to mean this, but Sally, are you sure you meant that? Because perhaps you meant this. And then, you know, he says like, oh no, that's what I meant. And Jim go, oh wow, I didn't realize that we'd been talking about that. And so, you know, again, you know, having a very diverse experience, being able to, and you know, you have to listen too. You have to listen, you know, pay close attention to what people are saying, how they're saying it, and is there anything behind that, to really come to an understanding of what they're trying to get across, what they're trying to communicate, and then helping them right with that communication. It's a great skill to have, and it's something that will be you know, is beneficial, I think, for everybody. And that also leads into, you know, what you're talking about in terms of the EQ, as well. You know, I completely agree with that. You know, the technical skills, well, you know, there will certainly be, you know, requirements for that, and being able to, you know, communicate and write a decent email. But you know, being able to have that ability to communicate with people, empathize, hear what they're saying, but then also being able to understand that, to understand, you know, how they're feeling, and will go a long way, I think, in anyone's career. Yeah,
completely. I think that's one of the hardest things about managing remotely, is when you've got lots of people in a virtual room, trying to keep them focused, and actually really paying attention to what people are saying is difficult, because people wander. People, you know, they're on their phones, an email comes in, it's very easy to get distracted. So yeah, cool. All right, take me to Mizuho. Take me to your current role and what you're doing now.
So again, it's another finance role in terms of a financial services company, but this time it's now with a Japanese company. And for me too, this is, again, in certain ways, it feels like, you know, my life, my path, kind of career had kind of led here, in the sense that, you know, having that bilingual, bicultural background, having worked in both the U.S. as, you know, outside of Japan, inside Japan, for companies large and small and in different industries, gave me a very good view on that. And I always felt that, you know, it would be my, you know, opportunity to be able to kind of give back and contribute, because, you know, certainly an organization like Mizuho, especially here in Japan, you know, going through a lot of changes, trying to focus on a lot more, you know, being a lot more global. And so it's certainly an area where my skills can be leveraged and used, very much so. And so, like, you know, getting back to, you know, helping communication between, you know, colleagues and offices inside the larger organization, you know, just a lot of there. So that's been kind of it's been a very interesting ride so far. You know, again, it's been a very different experience, having, you know, mostly worked for, you know, foreign companies, if you will, inside Japan, versus for actually working for a domestic company. Has been, you know, it's obviously had its challenges, as any job does, but again, it's been a different, it's been quite a ride, and I've certainly enjoyed it. And again, you know, met a lot of you know, I'm always amazed with the different organizations I go to, and the different industries I'm in. You know, the people that you know, see out there that are working hard to, you know, to get jobs done. Right. And a lot of those characteristics that we will see in what you want to, you know, say leadership, I think, you know, cuts across, you know, a lot of cultural and language boundaries. You know, obviously there are differences in Japanese business culture versus Western business culture, and sometimes very large differences. But in terms of you know, in terms of the people that get looked at as leaders, not necessarily people that are having given that title or that role, but people that you see that look up to as in terms of as leaders, or look to people for leadership, or look to people for mentorship. I found to be those kind of traits, like we said before, that EQ, the ability to listen, and empathize, is a common trait. I think that regardless of the language that you speak and the culture you're from, are very valuable. And you see people gravitate to that. They may not know why specifically, but I've seen that myself. From my own experience, and the type of people that I look to for, you know, earlier on in my career, that I went to for advice, that I enjoyed having as mentors, even if it wasn't an official mentor-mentee relationship, someone that I looked to as a mentor. You know, looking back now, and what was it about that made me comfortable to talk to this person, or felt like I was being really, you know, listened to, and it's all the things that we just spoke about. But again, that's where my experience on the receiving end of that is then translated into I put that becomes a part of my skill set, and I do that when I'm on the giving end in terms of mentoring younger and junior staff.
Completely. I think I personally work with Mizuho as well, and I think it's all about the people, right? The people and the collaboration and the team development at Mizuho is fantastic. Like, everyone works extremely hard. You can tell that like the leadership's very good. You can tell that people have the buy-in and the excitement and drive is there. And I think that comes down to that everybody you speak to has got time for each other. Everybody you speak to is a good person first, and then really good at their job second. But it's almost like in that order, and I think that comes down to a lot of the culture, which I think was something that Alex Ferguson at Manchester United tried to create, and obviously did very. He's the most successful manager of all time in English sport. But he almost wanted to sign good people first and then good football players second, and that's the feeling I get with Mizuho. So I really enjoy working with you guys. That's great.
So you work with us in the UK.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's good. I'm enjoying it. I work with the front office development teams and front office business side as well. So
okay. Well, we probably know some of the same folks then.
Yeah, completely. Good. Okay, we'll wrap it up, but as we come to my favorite part here, and that's the quick fire questions.
Okay. All right.
2 or 3 pieces of advice you would give your younger self or the next generation coming through. What would they be?
Oh, all right. Keep your eyes and ears open for opportunity. Right.
Yep.
Absolutely. And listen as much as you speak. It's important for you to be able to communicate and tell people what you need, but you also have to be what they call an active listener, because that will help you a lot as well.
Completely. Absolutely. Okay, great. And 3 resources you use for self-development. So books, podcasts, publications.
Oh, well, certainly, lately with a lot of what's been going on, I guess the, what's called, awareness or, I listened to a podcast by Sam Harris called The Waking Up. Kind of a mindfulness. I'm very, that's not very much into the religion side of things, but which he is very much so. It's more almost, I won't call it scientific, but again, and of course that whole area of mindfulness is very, very broad, and it means different things to different people,
Sure.
and there are very different things, aspects of it too. But that for me, again, getting back to kind of like the putting things in perspective in terms of your life and your business is good. Certainly as I get older, my health obviously is very key as well. I think you have to obviously you got to be smart, you got to be motivated, it's important what's going on inside the brain, but your brain is also just a part of, it's an organ inside of your whole body, and keeping fit, I just I've actually kind of gone more kind of plant-based in terms of my diet, and I've found that to be extremely beneficial to me. I feel much better on that one, and so in terms of books, again, we're still have a bookshelf of a lot of books that I have yet to read.
Standard.
Standard things. But I've lately I've kind of become a lot more interested in some history.
Nice.
And I don't know, it's a lot of it is just interest as well. But there are lessons in leadership, right, in a lot of historical, whether there are biographies or
very true.
and it's not just about business, right? Sometimes it's you might be reading about Genghis Khan, right? So those again things are things where you find an interest in you doing for learning, but are there takeaways there that, and how would you integrate that, or how would you a lot of things are there to reflect on.
Sure.
And so those are some great areas and things that I've been very interested in lately.
Nice. And last one then, who's your role model and why?
Who is my role model and why? Well, it's it's very interesting. If we had spoken to me about this a few years ago, I might have said Carlos Ghosn.
Okay.
Because he was a guy that had come in, right? I mean, because back when they brought him in, Nissan was on the outs.
Yeah.
Now, what has happened lately, whether or not you believe him, or you believe that he got trapped into that into something, and whether it's fair or not fair, you certainly have to credit with him with a lot of things that he was able to do in Nissan, and helping turn around, especially as a foreigner, to come in, right? And one of the things that he had, one of the things that always left an impression was, I believe, that one of the first corporate wide meetings he had, right, as a non-native, non-Japanese speaker, he came in and gave in Japanese. Now he obviously he had to read it, right, and it was, the pronunciation wasn't perfect, but again, that shows the commitment to become a part of of the organization, to speak the language, if you will, although that's a little bit more literal. But I think again, everybody has their ups and downs, and history will tell. They believe, what history will write about him. We have yet to see. But a lot of the recent kind of legal issues aside, it's been, it was also very interesting to watch, right? How he escaped from Japan, and how that did not, that certainly did not reflect very well here, and go down very well here. But I've always been interested in kind of the business leaders, and I would say also too, people, and I don't know if you know who a guy named Gene Kranz is. He was a flight director in NASA, and so he was involved in a lot of the early NASA missions, the Apollo missions. A lot of the, you talk about things that you can get done as a team. And really, if you look at one of the greatest examples of that is the U.S. space missions in the 60s, getting a man to the moon. And man, what you can do if you get the right people together and focus them on the right job, right? And also, right, everybody has their role to play. All the teams, flight control, or all the different and the team players there had to do their part. But I look at that and I think that some of the leadership there, a guy like Gene Kranz was a great role model for what we can do, what we can achieve as a team when we have that goal and unity of focus. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wholeheartedly agree. Right. Okay. That's us. That's us. So, John, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining me and sharing your insights.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. I've really enjoyed listening to, obviously, your story, and I hope there's lots of takes there for the next generation coming through that can help.
That's great.
If anyone's listening and they want to pick your brains, I'm sure they can message you on LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
Thank you and good luck. And obviously to the listeners, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed listening, and obviously we'll bring you more stories from inspirational leaders next week. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.